Just the raw definition is dislike of, contempt for, or ingrained prejudice against men.
The way men are taught to, or not taught to, deal with their emotions, misandry. Men being murdered, misandry. Men being in prison, misandry. Men not being taught how to socialize in order to form healthy, like supporting, non-romantic, non-sexual bonds with other people of any gender, misandry. All of that shit, I would say, falls into that and is reinforced by systems of power.
I don't think you should call that misandry. I think you should call that patriarchy. I think all of that is patriarchy.
If you have a black man and a white woman and law enforcement involved, how's that situation going to go? Right? So in my mind, it was like, well, it's her femaleness that is kind of modifying this and creates such a dangerous situation for the man who's involved here. But when I stepped back and, examined it further, it's not her femaleness that's necessarily granting her that, it's her whiteness. Like, the whiteness is where the power is coming from. It's not the fact that she's a woman. In fact, the fact that she's a woman in that scenario,
it's a red flag.
We should all just do mushrooms.
I was just thinking that. I actually had a dream that, because I have a mushroom chocolate bar just like on my desk in the other room there, and I had a dream that I like accidentally ate it instead of my other chocolate before meeting you guys, and that I just showed up high on mushrooms.
You are. That's like you. For some reason, like halfway through the live, you kept saying that your microphone was fucking up, and we were like, "No, man, we can hear you fine." And you kept screaming at us. It was crazy. I don't know what the fuck is going on.
You kind of sounded like a robot. It was.
Yeah, you were like making a robot noise.
Yeah.
You were making a robot voice into your regular microphone.
Sounds like something I would do.
It's really disruptive. Yeah. Also, wake up.
Yeah.
Oh, don't no.
That's
don't
pretty
do
good.
that.
That's pretty good. Ed. Good job.
We miss you.
No.
We miss you, Finley. The doctor said you don't have long left. It's been 60 years.
So on that note, let's get into it. Welcome to Waving the Red Flag, the #1 childhood movie nostalgia, and we'll go with transcendentalist, dread-inducing video game podcast in the world.
You damn right.
At least top 50. We are at least one of the podcasts in that space of all time.
I mean, we're the best one you're listening to right now, at this current moment. So, number 1 on that list.
Yeah, absolutely. We got Eddie Button, we got Josh, we got Alvin, and also special guest tonight, Fam, coming through. How you doing tonight?
And very, very happy to be here. I was excited when
Can't even fit through doors. Too swole.
Too swole.
Yeah.
That's the next evolution of the rebrand. Swole, too swole.
Too swole and too wholesome.
And too wholesome, Too swolesome, too furious,
Starring Finn Diesel. Let's go.
Finn Diesel. I hate that I'm going to use that.
You got to do it, man. You got to do it. I watch it. I've only seen like 3 2/4 of like the Fast and Furious movies.
How many of them are there now?
10 now.
Like 17, about, I think.
10.
They started doing Roman numerals and shit.
Yeah.
It's like Land Before Time for car bros.
Except for Land Before Time went to that phase where they were all straight to VHS and became the same movie.
True.
But these are still like making like billions of dollars. Well, not making billions of dollars. The revenue produces billions of dollars. They're actually not making much profit anymore.
But everybody's getting paid, so that's good. Yeah.
That's all that matters.
Yeah.
They're still making the second part, the part 2 of 10. So, what kind of topics you guys looking to get into tonight? Anything catch your eye? There's only one I don't want to do. To be
what's that one? Which one?
That's the one we're doing.
I bet I know.
You know which one it is? Oh, is it?
Does it end with a question mark and has 3D letters?
I mean, I'll tell you what it is. I'm a grown ass man. I don't want to necessarily do. I don't necessarily want to do women solo traveling without a woman present, because I feel like our perspective on that is kind of like what can we possibly say on that? But everything else I think is solid.
Holy shit, I can say.
No, it's gonna be some
the podcast.
I mean, you can talk the whole rest of the podcast on any fucking thing, including shit that you have never seen before. Like I've seen you do it, but that don't mean it would be good takes. But again, I'm open to whatever. But that's the only one that I was like, I don't know about that one.
I
I don't
mean,
know.
I thought it was interesting. It was interesting to like look into and learn about. But yeah, that's not really like as someone who's not a woman, I don't really have many like valuable takes on that, I guess.
Yeah, like
I know women.
I think
I know women that
that's what
travel
I'm saying.
by
I
themselves.
came out of a woman. That's where I started.
And best believe she was going places.
Yeah, she was solo traveling with me for 9 months, man. Come on, like luggage. I know all the kind. I feel like I don't know. Like I understand being okay. I understand being like I don't want to talk as an authority on a given thing because I'm not an authority on a given thing. But this idea that we like can't talk about like from a third perspective a thing because we're not part of that group. I don't know that I agree with that.
So I don't.
I feel like
that's-
our perspectives are
that's-
actually interesting and valid. They're incomplete.
That's
But,
that's
yeah.
not my point. That's not my point.
Okay.
So we talk about things that we have no direct experience on all the time. We had a
Yeah.
whole conversation about Drake and Mos Def, and none of us are fucking rappers, at least not anymore.
Nope.
Finn, I've heard
Yeah,
your
yeah.
mixtape. It was great.
That's true.
But, you know, we're not rappers right
Never Ending
now.
Flowery was amazing, actually.
100%. So my point
Hate
is
that when
that
you
you
use
don't
that too.
necessarily have to be something in order to talk about it. I just don't think that having a perspective on solo female travel as a man, I don't think there's much meat on the bone there. I just don't think it's a lot for us to talk about that's substantive. Like I can spitball about what the fuck ever. Like I can talk to you about anything.
Okay, and I'm going to shut the fuck up because now we're just talking about what we shouldn't talk about. But I do think that I would. I think that part of what
And
I
we
found
can
quite
talk
interesting-
about it. Like I don't think
Yeah.
it would be like
We can-
taboo or anything. I just don't think it's
Yeah.
substantive.
I do think that half of the interesting thing about women solo travel is just solo travel in general. Because most of the things that are brought up in that video are just things about being a human. And so I feel like sometimes we kind of go, a thing that women are doing is a women's thing. And I'm like, sometimes it's just like, no, I'm inspired by this. So I want to talk about this inspiring thing that women happen to be taking lead on is kind of part of the thinking.
When I was kind of thinking about it, where I was kind of getting snagged is it's like, well, I have questions. I have questions for like women who solo
True.
travel is kind of where it comes to. So it's like I want to, because I can speculate on why they'd want to do that. I can make some guesses, but it's like, but they know the actual answers.
Yeah.
Fair.
So with that being said, it's misandry.
I watch women on TikTok traveling all the time on solo, but you know what I'm saying? I get it, baby. I get
Yeah,
it.
no, we know what your TikTok feed looks like. We know the girl in Tokyo. We remember, yeah. It's just nothing but
Hey,
bookmarks.
Look, we all had the same girl come across our feed, so I don't know.
Yeah, we
why
did.
he's
Yeah, we
singling-
did. Hey,
I don't-
look,
I
you
don't
weren't
control
solo
what-
in that travel.
I don't control what the
I'm with you.
algorithm sends me. I don't control what the algorithm
Yes,
sends
you
me
do.
directly.
Yeah,
no,
you
I
do.
don't. They're trying to introduce me to new stuff in addition to feeding my echo chamber. They're trying to keep
Okay.
me hooked. You know?
Yeah,
Oh,
you
but
know,
might
you
like
know
some.
it was some claps in that echo chamber.
Yeah.
No, Josh, what was that going? What was that going, Josh? What was that going, Joshua?
Oh, he's saying your whole name.
I know, right?
It's fisticuffs.
I was just saying, like, you know, the algorithm probably said, Albert, you might like some cheeks, you know, and, you know, with some wholesome, independent black women traveling into this city that, you know, we know that you would like to visit.
Yeah,
Fair enough.
Everyone's clicking on it,
Fair enough.
we
Here
think
you
you
go.
might too.
Fair enough.
and it wasn't wrong.
Or was it?
It wasn't, because we all had the same reaction. But anyway, let us.
Fair enough.
We digress.
Okay, so I'm in between is misandry real and the loneliness crisis.
I got bad takes on both.
I know.
I have takes on both. I don't know how good they are.
Okay, somebody raise your hand with something that you feel like you have a good take on.
I mean,
Which
like,
one-
we can,
which one you gonna do?
let's go ahead and start off with is misandry real?
Let's hit it.
You know, y'all know my track record. I'm the least liked when it comes to these topics. And
Starting
I
with the
actually, you know,
spicy one.
just for like argument's sake, I had
Oh,
to like
shit.
Google.
I know what the fuck is
Googled
happening
the
right now.
definition
Okay.
because off a fresh read is misandry real. Yeah, I would say it is, but you know, I think a lot of people use the word incorrectly. You know what I'm saying? Like, and then like there's a lot of misogynism within said misandry or internalized But just the raw
Whoop-de-whoop,
definition is dislike of, contempt for, or ingrained prejudice against men. And when I read that, I said, hell yes, misandry is real.
It's right there on the paper. That's what y'all selling. Ain't
I
it?
see it in the
Match
comments.
the description.
I see it in the comments.
Hold on.
I see it on the internet. I see it in like just some of the shit that like I've seen like women would say stuff like I've never agreed with a man like or just like downplay men's intelligence just overall like just on some dumb shit. And I get it. I get it why you could understand that, but when you just like paint this narrative, this picture for an overall group to where you label every single man or just because a man is a fucking man, he's already like 2 steps behind, you know what I mean? Like just that prejudice against men. And also I extend that olive branch to them because I can understand where that does come from as the overall culture that we live in.
I think prejudice is the word that most people should be using in these situations, but when people talk about misandry, they're using it as an equal and opposite description for misogynistic behavior. And I think that that's inaccurate in a similar vein that I wouldn't say reverse racism is a thing. When people say that reverse racism is a thing, what they're really talking about is prejudices based on what the actual accepted definition of racism is versus, you know, a Merriam-Webster kind of situation, which is usually what like the layperson will quote with racism. However, to your point, Josh, I do think there are prejudices against men. I don't think those prejudices are something that I want to give too much time to, because if I'm devoting finite resources on how we solve certain things, that's very far down the list of, you know, that's like 200th on the list of problems that I need to solve in the world.
It ain't even 200, baby. I got you.
Yeah, but I do think that what you're saying at its core is correct, but I think that a lot of people try to think of it as an equal and opposite reaction to what women experience, and that's just not
misogyny.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not. Now I agree with you 100% there. It's not an equal thing.
Yeah, my take about to be
misogyny.
worse than I thought. All right.
Oh shit! I mean, hey, let's get into it.
No, go ahead. Hey, look, 3-on-1. Like, y'all can all pile up and then.
I mean,
like,
look,
Drewski,
I agree with that point,
ahead.
but I want to hear what Finn and Eddie got to say.
I like Eddie. I like that you knew that I was just going to be like, yeah, no, I agree. Yep.
Join up like Voltron because I'm ready. I like to attack you. Let's go.
I absolutely think that there are people out there who are prejudiced against men. I think that exists for sure, and I think that there is something to be argued for misandry being baked into aspects of patriarchy, but of course patriarchy is itself incredibly oppressive towards women. Misogyny is a much more violent force. Misogyny is embedded in nearly every aspect of our culture. Potentially, I mean, there's probably an argument to be made for it being embedded in every aspect of our culture. And that's just not the case with prejudice against men. It's just, it doesn't work the same way. And I've had this conversation with men many times before where, they say, well, misandry is a real thing. And you ask, okay, well, what rights did men have to fight for? Men, like as a group, men specifically. Because of course, when you start getting into obviously like race, that adds a whole other layer to it. Like men who are.
I was about to pull the civil rights movement out my ass.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. And that's where, but that's.
I had to fight for the right to vote.
That's exactly it, though. It's like it's misandry comes with other features. I think like the violence towards black masculinity in particular is a really good example of that. It's where like blackness with manhood creates this like, it's intersectionality, right? Like it creates a new kind of force that people react to in a different way than just reacting to just a more generic idea of men, which in a white supremacist culture typically is describing, like in most people's minds, I think of white men specifically, right? So I think there's a lot to unpack on the topic of misandry, but overall I agree that hatred of men just for being men specifically is not a systemic thing. It's not embedded in systems of power.
I feel like we have this conversation around intersectionality, and we talk about like the unique experience that black men have when it comes to police violence, incarceration, education, healthcare, blah, blah, blah. And we talk about intersection, and inherent in intersection is like when you have two marginalized identities intersecting with one another. And we kind of go, okay, so they're black. That's a marginalized identity. And then it intersects with some other thing that causes a unique marginalized experience. And that other thing is manhood. But we somehow like skip over the fact that that must mean that there's a marginalized experience with manhood. Like we kind of wave over that. There's an intersection between these two things, but one of them somehow isn't a marginalized group. And I think inherent in what you said is there is a view on men and masculinity that is a part of what we call patriarchy that negatively impacts men's lives and always has. And when you intersect that with race, you have some very unique problems that result in the deaths, imprisonment, enslavement of black men, for instance. And it's unique to black men. So the idea that it doesn't operate systemically or through lines of power just seems self-contradictory. So to Alvin's point about prejudice versus racism, da 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 da. But I think when it comes to this, is misandry real? Josh, your point, for sure, misandry is something that like there are individual people who maybe have like a disdain for men, but I don't think that that's particularly that much of an issue. Like I don't think that causes much of an issue.
It's not a systematic, structure.
Yeah,
that
it's
men
not
face
it's not
against
changing up people's lives. But the part where I strong disagree is whether or not there is a systemic kind of thing that runs in parallel to something like systematic racism or whatever, or misogyny. And I would say, yeah, absolutely. Now, the conversation of whether or not it's like equal, I would say no, but like maybe, but I don't think that's the right argument to have to try and compare it or make it at odds with one another. I would just say it does follow systematic lines, and I feel like all of us in all of our content have talked about it like repeatedly, like we always talk about the way the patriarchy hurts men. But when it comes to saying, okay, so the patriarchy hurts men, then all of a sudden we act brand new, like what we just said doesn't count anymore. Okay.
So I don't think that maleness, because there's also a situation where you can have two things separately that have no effect, and then when you combine them together, and now they have a huge effect. That's how you get like bombs and shit out of like benign materials. So synergies
does
can
that
make
work with intersectionality, I guess is the question.
That's my point. I think it does,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So I think that maleness in and of itself is not marginalized. So I think when you attach, to Finn's point, when you attach blackness and masculinity, that's when you get that point. That's when you get the bomb, right? Benign material sitting in a safe storeroom, no
Inert.
explosion.
Yeah.
Two things combined, synergize, bomb. I think that what's hurting men now with the patriarchy is the fact that the patriarchy is being pushed back against, and those men are not actually adapting well. So I think their inability to adapt to a situation where the patriarchy does not allow them the same overwhelming show of force that it used to, even quite frankly, 30, 40 years ago, like that has changed. I think they're not adjusting to that. So I don't think the patriarchy in and of itself, was overwhelmingly positive on most output metrics for men. Like men were living longer. It helps your careers. Like it's like that's systemically supported. I think now what you have, and then so now what you see is a lot of people, and it ties into the the other conversation, which is why I picked these two as my favorites. To the loneliness epidemic, you have a lot of men that are more lonely than women because they're not adjusting to a situation where the patriarchy does not favor them as much. So I don't think there is a situation where you're marginalized just for being male. I think it only comes with, people along various racial, ethnic, nationality lines where you combine those two and then you get the bomb.
This is actually, sorry. No, go.
Go.
I just I fucked up a while ago. I made a mistake that like I had to kind of confront that, because I had a segment in one of my videos that was talking about how I have had people, present the idea of female privilege to me. Maybe it is real in certain scenarios, right? Because like I think it kind of would exist in a similar vein if we were arguing that yes, systemic misandry exists, then like yes, there are situations where it's beneficial to be a woman. I think would be kind of the flip side of that conversation. And in my mind, like my reasoning was, if you have a black man and a white woman and law enforcement involved, how's that situation going to go? Right? So in my mind, it was like, well, it's her femaleness that is kind of modifying this and creates such a dangerous situation for the man who's involved here. But when I stepped back and examined it further, which I should have done before like posting the segment in this video, it's not her femaleness that's necessarily granting her that, it's her whiteness. Like, the whiteness is where the power is coming from. It's not the fact that she's a woman. In fact, the fact that she's a woman in that scenario is she's powerless. Her whiteness creates a pure powerlessness that she needs to be protected, which is part of why she's so dangerous, right? Well, like in the scenario being described.
Hey.
So, yeah, I go for it.
My issue with that way of looking at what power is that I think instead of looking at like the impact of a set of situations to determine like who has power or whatever, we try and turn it into ideology first and break it down and go like, oh, well, actually, her power isn't really power because it's dependent on this structure. But it's like, that's kind of how all power works. Like an individual white man by himself or an individual white cop doesn't have power by themselves. They have a system that helps them. Now with white femininity, for instance, that power is activated through like imagery around pureness, powerlessness, demureness, all of that stereotypical shit. So you're not wrong there, but to say that a situation where you can enact violence on another person through a system, regardless of the narrative there, that's power. And that power exists uniquely when femaleness is added into the equation. So it's definitely not her femaleness by itself, but it's a modifier. Because if you change up the genders there, the scenario doesn't go exactly the same way.
But there are also various situations where black women don't get afforded that same level of treatment in the exact same situation.
Of course.
So
because they're not white.
So exactly. So the whiteness is the primary modifier, if nothing else, right?
See, you've left out a base rate comparison there.
That's
you would
fair.
have to say whether
that's
fair.
Yeah. That's fair. Okay. No, you're
you
right.
would have to compare them to black men to make the argument that you're making, which maybe you have stats on this, but that by itself doesn't tell us anything.
I actually do have stats on this.
I thought you might. Yeah.
As I pointed out at various points, I actually did a good bit of this research myself back when there were various sources where you could find like murder and also violent crime data, online, free access. The LA Times used to keep a database. The Guardian used to keep a database. Please support the Guardian if you don't. They constantly get their budget cuts, and that's why they can't do this kind of cool shit anymore. But the FBI also has not current but old like databases on those kind of things. The murder rate for men in general is astronomically higher versus their female counterparts just across the board. So black men get murdered way more than black women. White men get murdered way more, and even any misclassification doesn't close that gap significantly. But if you look at violent crime and like police brutality and all that kind of stuff, it's actually much closer than you think. It's actually very, very close in terms of overall rates.
For everyone, or black men and women specifically?
Black men and women. For violent crime and police brutality, I actually didn't look at every single race. I looked at every single race for murder with my data.
Okay.
But for black men and women, it's very, very close if you look at it from that wide of a perspective.
Really? No, I mind blown. Didn't know that.
Yeah. But again, like black men are something like 6 times more likely to be murdered than black women. But if you add in assault, again, every violent crime, like it's
Gotcha.
it's almost 1 to 1.
I think that gives us like a picture, but it's not like I think sometimes we do like when it comes to these conversations around the way that like, for instance, patriarchy hurts men. I think we start doing this weird shit where we like try and like do food stamp discounts on being murdered. Like if a single population is getting murdered at like a rate of 6 to 1 to another population that they share comparable experiences of violence with, in any other scenario we would go, that's a unique problem. Like that's a unique problem that is affecting this demographic. But here for some reason, I'm not saying you specifically are doing this, but here we try and go like, oh, but these murders don't like this discrepancy in murder doesn't actually count. It's like being dead is one of the worst situations that can happen to you.
That's
if it's happening at 600% for one group versus another, that's a systematic issue, period. Even if there's some other metrics that are like kind of equal. So, and I don't think we play that game with any other group.
And I agree, but some of it is like I remember being at the table with like CDC officials, and because again, this is a relationship that holds true for every single like racial ethnic group, right?
Yeah.
So one of the things that they will talk about is testosterone poisoning, right? So it's like risky behaviors based on potential physiological differences because there are very few outside of hormonal, in terms of like brain chemistry and all that kind of stuff. Like our brains are very, very, very similar. There are very few areas of the brain that are different. Like you're looking at like the preoptic area, and then amygdala responses to fear stimuli, all that kind of shit. But very few areas of our brains are different. So they actually talk about testosterone poisoning almost in an academic sense. So like a lot of this stuff is just like men being more prone to dangerous behaviors, like and dangerous and aggressive behaviors. Now I'm not saying that's not exacerbated by the patriarchy, but I also don't think that that's something that's caused by women, right? Like I think that's something that's like
No.
we
And
just
see, this
do
is the
we
thing
do
that I
it we
think,
do
yeah.
it we do it at a systemic level because we do
think
it
there's a
individually and it scales up.
I think there's a problem with the argument, like the argument that I'm making and the way that it maybe comes across is that, and understand because there's a point that all of you all have made, which is that like misandry mostly gets brought up by idiots who are trying to derail conversations around misogyny. And so a lot of the arguments are like, oh, men's negative experiences are actually the problem, like the cause by women or caused by feminism. That's not true as far as I can tell. And so I just want to preempt that stance of like, oh, women are causing the. That's not anything in my argument, at least.
Yeah,
Though
yeah,
I understand why it's associated with the argument that I'm making, but it's not my argument.
Yeah, that's fair.
So, like, when it comes to us being more, because implied by what you were just saying is a conversation that comes up a lot when people go like, men are getting murdered alive. This is a problem. This is a systemic problem. This is something that happens at power structures. They're being murdered and then imprisoned for murdering people, and a shit ton of men are just being locked away. Like chunks of our population are just being locked away. Part of that is people then go, yeah, but who's killing them? Oh, well, other men. Well, therefore, it doesn't count. This makes no sense as an argument. Like, first of all, even if it is a testosterone poisoning thing, I would venture that a whole bunch of it is to do with socialization. And when you teach men that, one, it is appropriate to induce physical harm on other men in order to make your point known, and two, that your pain in response to being harmed is not valid, those two things are a way that a power structure indoctrinates you into your own self-harm. And I think that that's a large contributor to this, and I would classify as internalized misandry or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, and I agree. And so my final piece on that, because I knew that's where they was going, and I think you're right, is that murder is actually fairly fucking rare. So all of that to say, if your point stands on say murder, I'm not saying it does. I'm just saying like as a person, because but I'm just saying like as a person who's talked to people where like a lot of times they bring up the same murder statistics I have. Murder's still fucking rare. This is the killer of men. Like just being frank.
I would say that's also a socialization issue. Like that
is a better argument. No, that is a better argument.
Yeah, because
that is a better argument.
I picked murder because we talked about murder. Like the same way we could talk about.
And I'm not saying you
tax,
did,
and it's like a little thing. It's like no, the shit stretches out in a bunch of different ways. If we want to talk about the way men are taught to or not taught to deal with their emotions, misandry. Men being murdered, misandry. Men being in prison, misandry. Men not being taught how to socialize in order to form healthy, like supporting, non-romantic, non-sexual bonds with other people of any gender, misandry. All of that shit, I would say, falls into that and is reinforced by systems of power.
And then even if you and to your point, even if you want to put all of those things as small things, it could just be death by 1,000 cuts. So my whole thing is that I don't think you should call that misandry. I think you should call that patriarchy. I think all of that is patriarchy.
That to me feels like an unnecessary, semantic, concession.
I think semantics matter.
No, I agree. That's why I'm saying
and wait till we talk about how I'm gonna tear apart the loneliness epidemic piece of this. What you call it?
Oh yeah, because
communication of how you talk about this shit and how you socialize this stuff 1,000,000% matters. And I think that misandry versus calling something patriarchy is profoundly impactful in the way the social media landscape is. I'm curious to see
how you say this, because I would say if you have a system that impacts lots of different people of lots of different genders in various different ways, talking about the way it impacts a specific group using a unique word has importance. And my other issue is something that seems to be and Finn, I think you should go in a second because I feel like I haven't heard from you in a bit, but my issue with putting it all under one umbrella is that something that often happens is I hear men complain about a valid emotional issue or concern, and then people kind of go, oh, well, that's just the patriarchy. which by words is fine. But what they're actually saying is, hey, shut up about that. That's what you're actually expressing is just like the trickle down effects of something that's really mostly about non-men, femmes, women, whoever. And so the solution to your problem is not in addressing your problem directly at all. It's in focusing as much energy as possible on our concerns. And I think that's a very good way of alienating a group of people whose concerns are actually entirely in line with what non-men want anyway. But by saying, hey, no, it's not about your thing. It's about this larger thing. So shut the fuck up about your specific thing. Instead of going like, cool, that's a specific part of this. Let's address those while we're addressing this because it's all part of the same system. But we don't do that.
So, and I'm going to shut up because then, it's becoming a fucking Eddie Budden and Ish podcast right now.
Yeah.
That
That's why you acting light skin, bro.
There's a very good reference, by the way, for people.
Oh yeah, but I caught you, my nigga.
We see.
I see it.
There we go. But
I didn't know the girl, man. I didn't know her from you.
Yeah, man. You didn't. You didn't. Shut the fuck up in 2024. But anyway, so
see, well, you always fucking acting light skin on this podcast, bro.
You the lightest motherfucker on the podcast. Actually, not today. Not today.
I mean,
anyway,
you got beat out by one shade, nigga. One shade.
You're welcome, Eddie.
Thanks, Ben.
That's my favorite soundbite of the year.
What?
That's my favorite soundbite of the year, man. That's the greatest shit that he's ever done, and that's saying a lot.
What is?
Where they arguing about that shit, and he just throws his headphones off and says, "Shut the fuck up." In 20, no, yes.
Oh yeah.
Stop talking about the shit.
And he starts yeah.
After he claimed that he claimed Ish was being emotional.
Yeah, he was like, "Why you being emotional?" And he's fucking screaming at the top of his lungs, like he's gaslighting the fuck out of that man. The whole fucking podcast.
Man. The way he was moving was wild because he was literally screaming at the top of his lungs. The other dude says, "Man, I'm about to start screaming back at you," and he's like, "Look, I don't know why you're acting hysterical." I'm like, "You're a piece of shit. You're a piece of shit, man." Because I know whatever he got accused of doing, that he did all of that.
He did that shit. Whatever they said he did it.
Whatever they said, he did that shit. Holy fuck!
Guilty as fuck. Like goddamn.
Guilty as fuck. Okay.
No, but so my only thing about how you just phrased it is I think you're doing what you accuse other people of doing like earlier when you stated in that section, right? So when people say that that's just the patriarchy, what I think ultimately they're saying is that it's the onus is on men to solve it, which I firmly believe, right? So if it's a man-made problem, men need to come up with solutions to solve it. And when you put it in something that has the connotations and baggage of something like misandry, what you're saying is, it's not my problem to solve it. It's everybody's problem to solve my problem. Oh, okay. Yeah. So I think putting it in patriarchy makes it squarely like this is on you, motherfucker. Like the onus is on you to fix the shit that your structural issues caused. And now I'm off my ish shit.
But it also kind of neglects the fact that like these interactions aren't just people on X, formerly known as Twitter, being shitty to a guy who's sad, right? Like I feel like so often when we're talking about this kind of thing, a guy brings up a problem that is unique to men, like male loneliness, male isolation, these kinds of things, and it's like, well, the way to solve that is solving all of these other problems that impact people of other genders, and you need to shut up about it. Does that really happen outside of the internet? Does that happen off of social media? And don't get me wrong, interactions on social media matter. They impact individual people. They impact the way people feel about themselves. It's not like those things are negligible. They matter. Those things matter. But I've got actually like here within reach, like abolition, feminism now. Angela Davis has dedicated so much of her life to like specifically addressing the way black men are targeted by patriarchy and the violence toward them and the incarceration of black men. And that's like a huge part of what she's done in her feminist work and many other feminists as well. I mean, right on, oh my God, I promise I didn't do this on purpose, but right under it, we've got The Will to Change by Bell Hooks. Another feminist
I got a shelf. Where's the scholar? Yo, turn your camera. Turn your camera.
Scholar coming through.
Bell Hooks, bitch.
But that's the thing, right? Is these guys who are using the phrase misandry, these conversations that make it seem like it's just interactions on social media where a man is sad and people shut him down and tell him to, like, suck it up. It's like, no, these guys have the opportunity to learn about all of the work that feminists are doing, have been doing to address these problems for men. Like, that's a lot of what feminism does. Specifically, that's what black feminism does. And so it's just, to get back to everything that we were... Yes.
Especially bell hooks.
Yep.
And one thing about... I was just going to say, like, one thing about, like, she gets a lot of hate from men, oddly enough.
Bell hooks?
Yes.
She's the
that's
nicest.
Not true. That is
she's the nicest feminist of note.
Exactly.
She's nice as fuck the black man. Just being honest.
I've seen like so much hate. I've seen like I've just seen like a lot of hate just in comments on bell hooks. You know what I'm saying? And it doesn't make sense because I don't even think they actually take the time to like fully ingest the entire message and just look at something just to respond and be upset about, to paint a picture for what their agenda is, which is appropriately aligned with, like Alvin so eloquently stated when he low-key shut us all up for a second. It's just like they have not adjusted well to current day state and time and where and patriarchy having us back against the wall in a sense.
See, okay, let me not get distracted by half of the point that you just made. I feel like what's happening in this conversation, and it's not an unfair thing because sometimes I think a word just gets poisoned by like words are how they're used. I'm very much a descriptivist when it comes to the way language works. So if we're saying that the word misandry has been co-opted in such a way that it's being used as a misogynistic dog whistle, I wouldn't even disagree with that if that's the argument being made here. But I think part of what's happening here is I'm trying to put forward an argument that there are systemic ways in which gender impacts men negatively, and it is enforced by power structures, and it impacts men in ways that are very, very significant. The word that I'm using for that is misandry because it seems like a good analog for that. It's more than just patriarchy, it's specific. Though I understand why we might go, well, okay, Eddie, you're using the word misandry, but half the time these motherfuckers using the word misandry are trying to act like, oh, feminism is the problem, or any of the points that you made, Finn. So,
yeah, that was beautifully stated, but I don't think misandry is the word for what we're describing. That's 1,000% correct, but I don't think misandry is the right word for that because just at the end of the day, just the bare bones description of it is the dislike of, contempt for, or ingrained prejudice against men. Now, that could be like on an individual level and a systematic level, but as far as systematic, there are certain instances, but like niggas ain't got like a whole bunch of barriers, societal barriers in their way just because they're men. Like that's
being
not
dead
happening.
is a barrier. What have I just spent the last 30 minutes going through?
Pause, my brother.
I thought you weren't using murder. I thought you weren't using murder as an example, motherfucker. I just told you that. I just told you about that one.
That's not what I was saying.
I just told you.
Look
at you switching it up.
Like you just right.
No,
I'm saying,
I can't give
It's
examples.
2024. It's 2024.
I can't give examples.
Ain't a motherfucker that like a nigga. What nobody talking about? Nobody dying, nigga.
So I
What
don't
the fuck
know. I'm gonna throw a wrench in the trans community. There is a phrase, transandrophobia, which is describing the ways
I'm
that...
sorry, one more time for me, brother.
Oh, transandrophobia?
Transandrophobia.
Yeah. So it's describing, and I don't know if I'm going to get in trouble for like giving cis people this word, but it's out there. It's out there, but but it's describing it's similar to trans misogyny, describing the sort of unique hatred of masculinity that is expressed by trans masculine people, the ways that the, for lack of a better description, misogyny that we experience through transphobia of being sort of like viewed as women by transphobic people, intersects with our transness and our expressions of masculinity to make us dangerous, to make us, easier to erase, to sort of neglect the psychological and like the mental health needs, the emotional needs of transgender men, very often in similar ways to the way that cisgender men experience that kind of erasure and, I guess, neglect, for lack of a better word. And I wonder, and this is just me musing, so nobody come at me. Whoa, Jesus! Nobody come at me for this one.
I see where you're going.
Yeah, I like maybe androphobia. Maybe there's another word we could use, because it's just recognizing the way that misandry has been completely it's been appropriated by
I'm
some pretty shitty
I'm open to
people.
that argument for sure. Yeah, that I'm very open to that one. And androphobia, and, yeah, because I was going to ask, because I didn't want to reduce it down too much to your trans identity, but it's like, it seems like if like maleness or manness or masculinity is like a part of your identity that is like contended about by society, then I feel like that's a very unique perspective where you can go, okay, this person didn't have an issue with me when they saw me this way. They have an issue with me when they see me this way, or in XYZ context. What is the thing that is changing? And when the thing that is changing is being a man or not being perceived as a man, if I'm using the correct phrasing, that seems like it's a unique perspective to talk about, let's say, androphobia.
I think that coming at it from the perspective of someone who, spent so long like living presenting as female, that contempt towards men, so much of it is based in fear, and so much of that fear is based in experience, right? So it's going
enough.
back to the fact that men are, to bring up murder again, and this time it's me doing it, but if men are more likely to be murdered, men are more likely to be victims of violent crime, men are also vastly more likely to, of course, be the perpetrators of violent crime as well.
Facts.
Right? So when I think, and, correct me if I'm wrong, Alvin, but when he says that, like, no, we need to emphasize that this is a male problem, it's because men are their own worst enemy, the same way that men, when it comes to violence, are the worst enemy of people of other genders as well. Right, so it's when we use the phrase misandry, it makes it sound like members of other genders need to step up and recognize the ways that men are disadvantaged, when really it's like, no, men are hurting, and men are hurting men. And are there ways that people of other genders, particularly women, reinforce this? Absolutely. Again, Bell Hooks talks pretty extensively about this. She talks quite a bit about the ways that mothers in particular kind of reinforce harmful patriarchal structures in their sons. But ultimately, who's swinging their fist, right? Who's actually committing the violence? And that's kind of what men need to acknowledge if they're going to make a change on that front.
Who controls the media messages? You know what I'm saying? Who controls the media messages? Who controls the government? Like, women are 51% of the population. They're not 51% of any government seat in any state, in any country. Who controls everything? Like, who's perpetuating that?
I don't think that control question is one. I don't think it's necessarily 1-to-1, and two, this goes back to a conversation that says something like,
"It's not 1-to-1." You're right. It's
Yeah.
It's substantially more outsized in favor of men than 1-to-1.
What I mean is, I don't think that it's 100% men in control of everything. That's what I mean. There's like some significant amount of influence coming from people that aren't men, specifically in media, much less so in government. But in media, I would say that's not like 0-100. But
I would disagree.
The other thing,
like, I would say that's probably where your argument is the weakest in stuff like media and fashion. Like, if you look if you look at the movers and shakers of, like, you can trace so much stuff back to, like, Sinclair and, like, News Corp, and like it's the web is very small, and it's male dominant.
And this is going to be all right. I'll for the purposes of this conversation, let me concede that. Let's say it's all men. My issue here is a point that's been made about white supremacy, which is that you don't need white politicians to enact white supremacy. You can have white supremacy in a nation that's run entirely by black people, or people who are non-white. So when it comes to the conversation around androphobia, the fact that powerful men have no issue with narratives that are harmful to men in general or less powerful men is not an argument against the existence of anti-male sentiments, androphobia, etc., etc. Like the Murdochs of the world not giving a fuck whether or not black men are imprisoned or poor men can't get like jobs that pay above minimum wage because they're not going into university and don't have pathways to alternative vocational skills. That's not evidence of anything other than that powerful people don't give a fuck about powerless people, which is true. So like back to the conversation about what are men going to do about it. If we want to say, yeah, look, androphobia, a lot of it is generated, safeguarded, and enacted by other men. Strong agree. Still an issue.
I don't think anyone's saying it's not. You know what I mean? But I mean that when
I think we're inadvertently are. I think that's yeah.
I mean, I don't want to speak for nobody, but I think, you know, with what you just said, I think we're kind of all on the same page. I saw Alvin give the, like, you know, but my whole thing is like, we've been saying that, like, this is a problem that men have got to tackle first and foremost before we expect anybody else to do something about it. And then, you know, we can, you know, get into like the male loneliness thing, because I think this is a good segue, is if guys are so lonely, and anytime like a dude, like, you know, not anytime, but a lot of times when guys do speak out, or they don't even feel comfortable with speaking out, expressing how they feel, like the trouble that they're going through, they feel lonely, or because they don't want to reach out to friends, or they don't want to try to make new friends because they'll feel like a bitch. You know what I'm saying? That's difficult, because like guys have got to give other space to guys to be emotional and vulnerable. You know what I'm saying? You ain't got to go full 100 with it. You know what I mean? Because you know, but at the same time, it's like, bro, like we need to give each other that space.
Yeah.
To be vulnerable, to be human beings first. And then once we actually have the space to be human with one another, we can actually be human to everybody fucking else. Instead of just being quote unquote men, which is why you know, that wraps up the whole like men being the danger, and then just the word men being thrown upon, packaged in that danger that guys represent, not only to themselves, but to everybody else. Because we're like, we don't treat each other like fucking humans.
No.
Yeah.
I think my only last bit would just be, I agree it's on men. Men should be doing this thing. All of this stuff that I'm categorizing as misandry is coming from guys. Only thing I would say is for people of other genders, it's like, I say it's maybe 20%, maybe 25% of the issue. Is just like, don't stand in the way. And to your point, Finn, maybe that's not really happening that much outside of the internet, but I do see it a fair bit. I do see, like we just talked about something on the live where I very much think that a woman was looking down on male expression, like a male expression of intimacy, of softness, of vulnerability. And I would say, look, is she the primary cause of this issue? No. Do I have more power to help men than she does to harm men? Yeah. Does she do wrong? Also, yes.
And also,
I think people.
No,
sorry,
go ahead,
sorry, Alvin.
No,
Go ahead. I was just going to say, I think people of all genders do reinforce these systems, right? Like the systems may be implemented by the most powerful group, which is generally speaking men, typically white men in particular, but everybody reinforces the status quo. Everyone is part of it. Everybody is, if you're, I mean, the way that I've kind of put it before is when the tide of society is moving in a certain direction, if you are not swimming against the current, you're moving with it. So if you're not doing the work, you're part of the problem, right?
Yeah, and I think that what this kind of showcases is one, if you want to hear Eddie talk about other people's secrets, you know, make sure that you're signed up for the Patreon. Make sure that you subscribe on YouTube and Spotify. But all of this patriarchy stuff, you know, it's a very fragile system. I think that people are having a problem dealing with the fact that it is as fragile as it is. It's kind of a house of cards. And speaking of fucking cards,
Frank Alvin Underwood with the House of Cards reference. We see you.
let's
We see
fucking
you.
go.
He about to be president
Saucy.
soon. He looking for his Claire. Oh yeah. So speaking of card games and that, some of y'all already know about this because we've been talking about it the last like week or so. But we've just created a card game for the podcast that captures kind of some of the energy that we have on this podcast. You know, red flags, who's waving them, etc., etc. It's a red flag card game. So the premise of this is any conversation game you've ever played. If you want to have conversations kind of like what we do on this podcast with your homies, homegirls, whatever, dinner party, you can ask yourself these questions. So we're just gonna play like a quick round of it while we're on the pod. Give you an idea of it. We'll drop the link in the description for those of you who are interested in, you know, grabbing a pack.
A deck, if you will.
Yeah, the deck. Yeah, decks. That's what I was like. What the fuck do you call a thing of cards? A deck of cards. Yeah, there we go.
The thing of cards, just like, you know.
Yeah,
You
thing
know,
of cards.
You know, so if you want to grab yourself a thing real quick, you
Just
know,
grab a thing real quick. Just, you know, just do it.
want to
Just make it
grab a
happen.
thing of these.
That's the the word, man. That's the word. So, is it a red flag if they sell drugs?
No, absolutely
think?
not.
No, not at all.
Not at all.
What they selling and what kind of
You're
weight
not-
they moving?
That's what I'm saying. Like you dating Griselda like it's just nothing.
Right?
I feel like that's incompatible with a healthy relationship.
Yeah.
I mean, you can ask all her ex-husbands. I feel like that was a red flag.
What kind of drugs and to whom? Like, there's
clientele.
there's a lot of variables.
I'm still
Like if
saying
she sells
no
a
here.
little bit of weed, fine. But
I'm
if
still
she's
saying
like
no.
a cartel member,
I
you don't
know.
mind.
She's
at all.
selling a little bit of weed. I ain't never
Oh, even
dated a girl
that you think might be an issue?
I ain't never dated no girl that sold weed.
I think
But-
even that could be a red flag because it's not necessarily like you're a bad person, but just
Yeah, no.
there's a different element in your life that maybe I don't want to be a part of.
Yeah, right.
Well, I'm sorry, Button. I didn't realize that you didn't want to fuck with me like that.
You sell drugs?
Mm.
No, I thought you were saying that like.
He sell Plan Bs.
Alvin,
thought-
goddamn, accidentally telling himself on the podcast. What's going
Of course
on?
I don't sell. Of course I don't sell drugs. But I'm just saying. I thought you were saying that if I was willing to date somebody that sold drugs, that you didn't want me to be a part of your life. Is how I interpreted that. So
Oh, that's you added some extra steps in there.
I
yeah.
did. I 100% did. Yeah.
I feel like I'm not even considering weed a drug because like for me if like I meet someone
When you
and,
sell
know,
it is.
well but like I live in Canada. If I'm on a date,
It's not a
and,
drug when you
know,
use
like,
it, but if you selling weed,
If you
that's a
selling
drug.
it, baby. It's, you
But it's
might as
like-
well
but-
got turned doing that rhyme, baby.
So it's similar than it like if I meet someone and they're like, oh yeah like I sell weed. Up here that's like saying I work at a pharmacy. Like it's just
Okay.
you work at the dispensary, like you
That's a
go in,
different
it's
thing.
like a tea shop, they
different
get
thing.
like the tins out, you get to smell them all, like it's
Yeah.
a whole
But
so
if
like
you're
I
a
don't even
street
really consider
pharmacist,
weed a
though.
drug.
Exactly.
Or if you
sell
sell,
on
or
the
if you
street-
sell like
if you-
fucking crack cocaine, I do think that's different than
Yeah.
even like a person that's like, oh, I grow some cool mushrooms. You want to try some? Like I think that's a little bit different than
It depends all on who and where. Because if you got people coming by the crib,
Yeah, that's a little. No, don't shit we eat at. You know what I'm saying? First of all,
you gotta have a
I
stash
get it,
house.
but
that's what I'm.
But
That's my
like, yo,
house.
I ain't gonna lie though. Like, you know what? I think I'm a little bit biased because I would date a girl that sold shrooms sooner than I would date a girl that sold weed. Cause I feel like
Yes.
shrooms is like a higher clientele. It's like a
I
higher
agree.
end.
Wow,
It's they're earthier.
Everybody
No, 'cause-
smoke weed.
Wow.
Exactly. Weed is kind of like
Everybody.
that's everybody. And you know, have you ever met everybody? That's like it's a lot of terrible people within that category.
Absolutely.
Whereas mushroom people is kind of like they're going to be more earthy. They don't wear shoes as much. A person who doesn't wear shoes is less of a threat, just tactically speaking. So
Josh
I'm a
is-
little bit less afraid.
Josh is like, if they smoke crack, like that's a problem. But if they sell pure cocaine, like zero issue. That's Wall
Hey.
Street. That's the investment bankers at that point. It's just
Exactly,
like,
yeah.
It's like not a
Well,
problem.
I guess there's some racial implications to that.
Yeah, that's
one,
what
but
I'm saying. Like
mushrooms,
the CEOs can come by the crib. The CEOs can come by the crib.
CEOs.
You know, that's fine.
Invite
That's
them
cool.
in.
no,
But no,
it's like
'cause I'm-
ketamine versus mushrooms. Like,
Yeah.
Look,
I
man,
mean,
ketamine.
Damn.
I'm telling you, man, ketamine's an RC drug, man.
Damn.
man, okay.
Theater squad.
You
coming through.
really a kingpin, man. I really off camera. I really know what's up.
No, you know what? There was this one girl in college. I used to pick up a little dime sack from her every now and then. She was cool as fuck. Had a loft downtown. Like she was cute. Like you know,
she did.
back. Yeah, you know what?
Mm-hmm.
But it would not be like the greenest flag. It would not be a necessary. I wouldn't consider that a green flag. That's for damn sure.
Fair enough.
No, ironically, but no. That a lot of that is because what you just said was I would have sex with somebody who's attractive, but dating this person who happens to have a bunch of clientele coming by the house all the time, that just seems like a dangerous and bad and not like one dangerous, but two maybe not conducive to a healthy relationship either. Like I just feel like any person who does business out of their home could be working at the dispensary is totally different than
I mean,
fucking
like
selling weed.
you gotta reel that one back.
That's what I'm saying. He didn't
I don't know.
say he didn't say illegal business. He didn't give any qualifiers.
It just says
He didn't
does
say
business.
illegal business.
If
He
she
didn't
makes
say-
soul food plates from out of her apartment, I feel like that's a bit of a red flag too.
She do hair out of
If
her
I'm being
apartment.
honest.
Like that's an issue. Like that's a fuck no.
Well, no, you know what? I think
You gotta reel that one back,
there
bro.
might be some androphobia.
She do
in what I'm
taxes
saying.
outside of her. She do taxes out of her apartment, bro.
Dangerous. Yeah. Dangerous, yeah.
You-
Whose
you-
taxes? What tax bracket?
Please,
Why don't you have
What
office?
if
Please use a different word. I'm pretty sure you didn't use that right.
what if she
I think I
sells
used it
drugs
right.
out of her apartment, but she
Yeah.
like ships them, so she just mails them to people.
Oh, that's different.
Oh, that's a
actually
federal
lot
crime. Now
different.
you really getting everybody fucked up. Oh yeah.
Motherfucker said that's different. Oh, that's fine. I just don't.
Okay, I'm stupid. I'm sorry.
He
You're
bas-
right. That's
he
not a
basically
Fuck a
just said-
misdemeanor.
Just say what you want to say, Eddie. This motherfucker is really
Okay.
just saying he don't want other motherfuckers. He just don't want other men around his girl. Is what he's saying. He just
and yes. First of all, yes, but also around me. That's like if they know where the fucking stash spot is and it's my spot or where we live together or where she lives together. That's a literal danger of robberies, thefts, and murders. That's what happens all the time to people who steal drugs. They get robbed.
That's why you
Have we gotten into? Eddie was arguing misandry is real because he like feels it every day of his life. Is basically what
I
I'm.
did say that. I did say that. Ben, don't do this.
You basically just said.
Don't do this, man. I done invited you on the podcast like 3 times. Come on, man. Don't turn against me.
That means
we
I've
was
gotten
on the same
comfortable.
team.
I know.
Yeah. No.
Introducing the fourth host of Waving the Red Flag.
Yeah, there we go. Permanent fixture.
I know.
New king, light skin. Okay.
Oh shit. I feel you on that though. I feel you on that.
Yeah.
My reservations are pretty similar. Cause I ain't trying to be around nowhere where it could potentially just be going the fuck down, especially not my girl.
Yeah.
I mean, like, we can hang out, we can kick
Good way to
it.
get
I mean,
shot in your sleep.
I'll be around niggas that sell drugs, for not all the time, but come on,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah.
But you don't live
Ain't
with
nothing
them.
new.
You're not seeing them regularly. Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean,
exactly.
I mean, not
I
at
ain't
my
with them
big
all the
age.
time,
You know what I'm saying?
And are you around them while they're doing the drug sell? I mean, maybe you
Couple
are,
times,
but
yeah,
like I would say.
yeah.
Okay, yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
I would say, yeah, I
Not,
wouldn't.
again,
I
not at
wouldn't
my
date
big
that person.
age, but I've done
Yeah.
it. You know what I'm saying? You know.
There you go. Not at my big age. We don't do
You
that
know.
shit no
There
more.
you go.
That
I'm not
ain't
the
cool.
same
Wrong.
person. I'm not the same person I was 5 years ago, 10 years ago,
No,
15
not even
years ago.
yesterday.
5 minutes ago. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
I can't be held
Whole
responsible
new
for
nigga.
that.
I can
for those
vouch for him.
decisions.
Whole new nigga right there.
100%.
Well,
Fan put out a book with like bookmarks and shit in it. I was on Amazon right now. I'm like, I got to step my game up. I bought a Kimberly Crenshaw book like 2 seconds ago. I'm
Right.
I'm
Matter of
ready.
fact. Matter
Add
of
to
fact.
cart.
Hold.
now we pulling books out.
I know this.
We're doing the book tour.
There
You
we
know,
go. What we got?
That's the next episode, book
I-
club.
He gonna read a passage.
I too.
He know what a
I
caged
too
bird
would like to
sings.
bring a topic that just so happened to cross my mind.
About to tell us.
People just don't live in the now, and that's why. Well,
About to tell
actually,
us.
I can bring that one out next. But people just ain't been living in the now. You know what I'm saying? So that's why. You know what I'm saying? Eckhart Tolle is always.
They got to know about the power of it.
You know what I'm saying? They don't understand the power of the now, man. And that's
Oh
why
my
we have a
God.
lot of this suffering. And a lot of you brothers need to read this good old book. Just a lot of people need to read this good old book and get in tune with spirituality. You know what I'm saying? Just something I just want to, pull off screen too. You know what I mean?
It just happened to be lying
It just
around, so you
was
may
right,
as
right
well,
there,
yeah. Yeah.
And then this motherfucker Eddie just pulls out a Quran, just like and now while we're trying to get right spiritually,
Assalamu alaikum, my brothers.
Make sure.
You know
It's the
what?
final call on the bean pie. Let's get it popping.
Right. Last
right.
call for bean pies.
Speaking of last call, we had time, ain't we?
Yeah, we sure are.
10-4, man.
Damn.
Damn it, we gotta
Too
get
bad
the
we couldn't
fucking.
do the loneliness epidemic.
We gotta get.
Hey,
we
we're
gotta
gonna
get
have
fan
another
back.
episode on that.
We gotta get fan for loneliness.
Would've-
epidemic, man.
That's the one I took notes on.
Shit.
That's the
Damn,
one I
okay.
took notes
We're
on.
gonna schedule you in for another one.
Don't life just do you like that? I tell you.
Trust me.
See, that's what I'm saying. Misandry, man. It's misandry, bro. That's what's happening to you.
Fan. I also had notes on loneliness. I have
Nobody.
fucking studies pulled up. I'm doing Google Scholar lit reviews and shit, and bro.
Were you looking at I gotta ask 2023 associations between social media use and loneliness and cross national population? Do motives for social media use matter?
I will say
that
I
one I
was
was interested
I was saying I was not looking at that.
Okay.
I was
and
Alright.
and again, I'm gonna close it out. But I was effectively looking at meta-analysis on tactics for public health communications, because I think that is a masterclass in how you latch on to something that's in the zeitgeist of public consciousness for a public health initiative. I got takes on that one.
Bet that. Shoot, you know what? I was actually looking at my thoughts for that topic.
And on that note, if you are an individual that is talking to somebody that is using misandry as an equal and opposite response to women gaining more rights, autonomy, power in societal structures, you may be seeing a red flag. But if you're a person that thinks that the patriarchy doesn't impact men at all and doesn't have any negative impact to men whatsoever, despite the fact that the onus may be on them, you may be waving a red flag. This has been Waving the Red Podcast. Make sure that you guys hit that subscribe button so that you can get the notifications as soon as we go live, as soon as the episode uploads. Make sure that you are looking at our membership options, joining the Patreon, membership on YouTube as well as Spotify. It has been Eddie Budden with our wonderful card game that was showcased here on the podcast. All of
That's
them
a
are
red
good.
flag.
All of them are good, despite what Eddie thinks. I think all of them are good. It has been
It's hours of fun with the whole family.
52 possibilities.
52 possible.
Yeah.
It may not even be 52 cards in that day. We gotta quit saying this shit. Oh,
It is 52. It is actually.
You
52.
sure it's 52?
I mean, I didn't count them, but
I know this
There's two
motherfucker
jokers in there. There's two jokers in there, B. You know what I'm saying?
It's a couple jokers in there. Yeah.
Facts. And then we got Josh here again. Josh, wonderful color palette today, man. You really doing it real big, man. Really compliments your undertones.
Immaculate, gorgeous,
My heart, man.
As always.
Oh, my God.
radiant.
Thank you.
And
Bring it out your eyes.
last but certainly not least, Finn, always a pleasure. We got to have you back. Like I really think we can have a really good discussion on some topics that we didn't get to today. You want to let the people know where they can find you?
Yes, absolutely. And please, because as soon as when I realized we weren't going to get to loneliness, I was like, my heart is broken. It's like I was so ready. But yeah, I am at Fantastic Mr. Fox. My channel name is Swolesome. I was on hiatus for a while there for school reasons, but I'm back. I'm posting on YouTube, and I talk a lot about masculinity and all of those things. So yeah, thanks for having me. This was great.
Thank
Hell
you
yeah.
for being here.
Always great to have you.
Don't forget
Hell
to
yeah.
do the
Goddamn.
like, comment, subscribe.
Yeah,
You know what
yeah,
I'm saying?
true. Subscribe, like, hit the notification bell.
Notification.
You
Bro,
know,
I definitely already said that shit. Eddie just
Oh,
blanked
he
for real?
did it.
Yeah.
He did it.
My fault. Shit,
He's
man.
zoned
I
out,
got
you know
your,
what
man,
I'm
I got
saying?
your
He was
body all
vibing.
fucked up, bro. My fault, G.
Yeah, sorry.
I'm tripping.
We did not know the
God.
nature of your game. I
Goddamn.
apologize.
And then this motherfucker just messed up the whole meme, but also in like a real like Eddie like suave way. But it's cool. You know what I'm saying?
Hey, you know,
Look, man. Shut the
I
fuck
just
up
say
in
whatever I gotta
2024.
say.
Shut the fuck up in 2024, man. Goddamn.
stop
Oh.
acting light skin on this podcast, man. I didn't know her. It's a raggedy swamp monster or whatever he said. I don't know her.
She's from the sewer. Bro, that shit was hilarious. I'm sorry.
I'm gonna start yelling back at you. All right, if you keep
I don't
it up with this
understand
shit.
why you just wanna raise your voice like that. No one's talking to you crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, man.
Oh man.
Peace, everybody.
Next week, see y'all.
It's a red flag.